uptime. If you have no reporting, you really don't know. And that's kind of still where I'm coming from. There has to be some minimal reporting on this.
So Paul, just checking on the minimal reporting. Oh, and also everyone, I have started the recording for the meeting. So we'll post on the YouTube at a later date. Paul, on the reporting side of this, are you, just make sure I've got the notes right, because I think you've generally been, everyone should be at some point subject to some sort of financial consequence for failure. Are you more that there's a grouping you would be comfortable with simply reporting at this time, or everyone reporting, but not everyone subject to the financial consequence? Or do you still think everyone should have some sort of financial consequence?
Well, what do you want for the consumer experience? Do you want anything goes, or do you want to set up some guardrails? I mean, that's basically what we get to. With the Tesla chargers, we haven't had a problem in the last 14 years. And why new entrants can't do the same thing is beyond me. I mean, why give them a break when we know that this can be done and it has been done? So that's kind of where I still come from. I mean, I'm looking at it from the consumer side.
Okay.
And without guardrails, you don't get what you want.
Got it. Nope. Understood. So yeah, definitely where you've been. Just wanted to check. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'm closer to 2, but I have a suggestion for 3 if we end up going to 3. But yeah, there has to be some sort of numbers involved here. You can't just wave your hands and say, well, it's up 97% of the time. There has to be something behind that. So that outside parties can measure. So that would be the uptime standards of option 2. So we have to know if it's not working, well, how long has it not been working, and what are we doing about it? So that's now. Josh said, Josh of Switch said, would a customer be willing to share uptime data publicly? I don't see why not. I don't see how that would be like a business disadvantage, but that could be decided separately. You could anonymize it, but I mean, how are you going to anonymize this? The station is either not working or it's working. You can't anonymize that. So, but so accurate numbers, I think, are important. Now, if we go to number 3, so somebody having a non-working charger gets notice of consumer complaints, but then they collect these in a basket or something. So if we go with 3, we have to, I think again, what do you compare it with? So there has to be an affirmative statement up front as to what my repair plan is if the station's not working. So because then somebody can compare. So if there's and all these records should be public. So if there's a non-working charger, and if I'm that motivated, I can go look at the public record and say, okay, well, they said that if it was not working, they would do X, Y, and Z. And then I could follow up and are they doing X, Y, and Z? So 3 would need to be beefed up a little bit, but I would prefer hard numbers because I think that's honest. That helps everybody. Everybody knows what's happening, and it makes everything clear.
Scott, for your number 3 discussion, you're saying, I think what you're saying is the beef up that the day that we wouldn't do reporting, but those who own the station or operate it need to have some sort of a publicly available record that indicates that it's not working and a timeline or game plan to bring it back online.
Yeah, because
Okay.
um, it's a market force. So what is going to fix the charger is a market force that's like I'm not earning income from it, or it's not supporting its associated business that it's set up next to. And so what enables the market force is knowledge of what's happening. So that's why this has to be public, because that is going to be the kind of market force that motivates action uh, to fix them. Because I'm a little
All right.
worried it says no negative action shall result of poor uptime reliability. That makes me a little nervous. There has to be some sort of we have to kind of know where the problems are.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Delegate Fraser Hidalgo.
Thank you. Yeah, it would seem to me that there should be some place where people can see what those reports are per what Scott mentioned. Also, in almost real time, we're in real time because you don't want them to go to a charger that's not working. And secondly, as far as what is reported and what's not reported, I think maybe this is a very basic viewpoint. Maybe there's a lot to think out, which is why we're doing all this. But maybe if you're like on a farm or something like that, and it's for your own use, of course, there's no regulated reporting requirements or anything if it's for your own like farm use or commercial property use for your commercial property. But if you're open to the public in any way whatsoever, then just like gas pumps have to be monitored. I think that there should be reporting requirements as well as penalties if those reporting if those aren't fixed. I'm not exactly sure how it's done with gas pumps, but if you're open to the public and somebody can use it, then you need to report on it. It needs to be up. And if it's not up, you need to say why it's not up and get it fixed. And if you can't get it fixed in a reasonable amount of time, then I think that maybe whether it's this work group or another work group, then that the discussion of fines should be we should discuss fines, because ultimately it's going to be very difficult for I just envision some family traveling home with a couple kids in the back of their car in the middle of the night, and they pull up at what they viewed as a charging station, and all the chargers are out and they have like 6 miles left or something like that. I think this needs to be taken very, very seriously. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So follow up on that. I'm taking the real time I'll come to in a second on the statement about some sort of, because I guess in this framework that we're coming up with, we're trying to say like the implementing, like a lot of details will need to be worked out by whoever the implementing agency is. I think what we're trying to figure out is and I think what you're saying is your view is all publicly facing EVSE, regardless of if it was publicly funded or not, should be subject to uptime, or should basically face a financial disincentive if they fail, if they aren't working correctly, or if they aren't working as designed.
Yes, and if obviously if they're not working and it's reported, they have a certain period of time, as long as they're within the time of the reporting requirements, then they obviously should be granted some time to make those repairs. But if they don't make those repairs in a timely manner, and to your point, whatever agency ends up doing this, I guess we'll have to define timely manner. But yeah, it's in the public interest, just like gas pumps. So I think you surmised my comments well. Thank you.
Welcome. And then on the real-time stuff, we'll come back to that one. That is a subject we have discussed in prior meetings, and I will. There's a document. One of the documents in here. We have to go back through that, so I will bring that back up then.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome. All right. Let's go ahead and hear from MDOT.
So MDOT's updated stance would be we support option 2 with the option to step up to option 1 after, I think based on the report every X years to General Assembly, if it seems like reliability continues to be a persistent issue. We would also support, we're thinking of some type of annual report similar to, I think, what Scott Wilson was saying for option 3, but I think for any of the options, some type of public transparency that the public could view. And I think that the report to the General Assembly could supplement the annual report or be the same one depending on the level of detail. But I think the idea is the annual report sort of provides some public transparency on the status of the standards, how effective they are, etc.
All right. Start with the first half of that real quick. Once again, just trying to make sure I documented where you're at. Start with option 2, an agency after reporting to the legislature has the ability to go up to option 1 if they determine uptime is a continuous problem.
Yeah, that sounds correct.
Problem. All right. And then on the reporting that you were saying for all of them, is that, sorry, can you just restate that? I think that's what I'm missing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to the idea that I think Scott Wilson proposed under option 3, but I think MDOT would be in support of it for any of the options selected, which is just providing transparency to the public about how the standards are going if there are persistent issues. And that would be on an annual basis.
Okay. That sounds like a state agency report, which I would agree with.
Yes.
That the implementing agency should be discussing that. I think, Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your idea was that the station, through some mechanism, is informing the general public if their station isn't working and putting some timeline or something on how they're going to fix it.
Yeah. If someone's trying to use a station, it's been not working for 3 or 4 or 6 months, then they can go look up the report, get information on it, see if there's a plan to fix it, follow up on that plan to see if that plan's been implemented. So.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure because I think that there was a distinction there. But Amanda, I can put down your favor of the annual report.
Yes, by the agency. Yeah.
Report. All right. Thanks. All right. Can do. MEA.
Yeah, we definitely wanted to echo what MDOT had here, just with the kind of 2 caveats being as a criterion. If the station is serving as a kind of emergency management hub, if we increasingly find that this location is serving underserved communities, there might be certain criteria that might dictate kind of the elevation towards 1. But we're fine with kind of starting this out with 2, but with the understanding that more and more fleets, more and more stakeholders are adopting this. So this might not just be kind of just a customer service kind of relation, but consumer satisfaction relationship kind of issue, but more of emergency management or even just underserved communities.
All right. The weights and measures.
Hello, everyone. So of course, weights and measures is going to continue with their original stance. We do not regulate uptime and reliability. However, we do oversee specifications and tolerances as set forth in NIST Handbook 44 and 3.40, the Electrical Vehicle Fueling Equipment Code. We would continue to operate within the parameters of our program as set forth in current statute, which means we have the ability to register these devices, ensure that they're working as designed per specifications and tolerances found in Handbook 44. Additionally, that they're NTEP, Certificate of Conformance, legal for trade devices, and that we have time parameters set forth for any particular device that's found to not be in compliance, as in they cannot stay in a state of non-compliance. They're required to repair. Device owners are required to maintain their devices and keep them in proper working order. And additionally, we do have consumer complaints as well, investigation of consumer complaints to ensure overall consumer protection, and that devices are removed from service until they're repaired if found to be validated. Additionally, we do already have a fine parameters as set forth in statute currently. That would be if we found intent or say gross neglect on the owner's behalf, such as intentionally placing a device back into service that a Weights and Measures officially previously removed from service and it has not been repaired properly. And at this time, Measures is going to continue to function with that idea.
Okay, so but Allison, so that's for accuracy. So basically,
Yes.
you would continue to support your handbook, your authority given to you by legislature to implement Handbook 44.
That is
For uptime and reliability, it sounds like you're saying you don't have a position on this, just that you don't think you should do it.
That is correct. We don't believe that it falls under the parameters of our program at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Comptroller's Office.
I do not believe we have a strong position on this right now, so we would just defer to the group.
Okay. Matt with Blink.
Thanks, Ben. So we support option 3. I would add, if option 2 is the ultimate recommendation, that a lot of detail needs to go into the way the discussion of reporting is structured, because it's really essential to aggregate data, protect confidential business information, and also protect consumer privacy. Just a couple other quick things, in regard to the comment about Tesla, I think it's also important to remember that has been until recently a closed ecosystem. Nobody drives an Exxon car or a Chevron car. It's a unique kind of operation that they have. We certainly recognize the reliability record, and as adapters become more widely available, there will be higher usage. On the other hand, like the engineers have told me that they have proprietary software that allows a connection to happen in like 5 seconds or fewer. And we don't know if that will be more widely distributed among the industry. The other thing too, and this might be for MDA to clarify, but I mean, I don't know that gas stations currently face a reliability regulation regime that is being proposed for EV charging, and it would, in some measure, disadvantage EV charging versus gas stations. And at a time when the state is trying to reach some very ambitious and important, goals around climate change, I think that's worth bearing in mind. The other thing too is that fossil fuel companies have been winning a lot of the NEVI awards, and for companies in the industry to be competitive, that's another aspect to consider. And the last thing is just around host-owned chargers that would face some additional compliance considerations that they may not have planned for when they initially installed the chargers. Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like option number 3, and then for option number 2, if that is the one selected, you're saying more detail around the reporting needs to be worked out. Correct. Is there anything more specific for me to put in there?
So, I think the reporting that we've seen from the federal government is kind of the right approach to take. I mean, we use API to report to the Alternative Fuel Data Center. So keeping things aligned rather than developing kind of a separate statewide set of reporting standards would be the easiest thing and probably the most efficient.
look at the alternative fuel database. All right, thank you. Delegate Allen.
Yeah, I largely echo the sentiments of my colleague. And Senator Hillman and I were talking about this the other day. I think I don't know. I'm probably leaning towards option 2. But like we said, there doesn't need to be room to grow for penalties and expanding that if needed.
All right, and Senator Heddleman, last word.
I think if we're going to go the option 2 route, then we should include some specific period of time where we would want to consider before to see if it's working. So not just let it be open, but rather say within 2 years or whatever, before we would switch to option 1 if necessary. I think, Matt said something about, that the fossil fuel companies, the gas stations aren't held to this standard. It's because, I don't know, 99.9% of the time that you go to a gas station, it works. So I don't know that that's really a fair comparison given where we are with consumer, expectations and utility. So I guess if it seems like there is some consensus gaining around 2, I guess I would want to tighten it up a bit.
Okay. I'm thinking, so what I'm generally hearing is if we go to, and this seems to be a general consensus down the board, is that there needs to be an ongoing evaluation, and there probably in the early phase needs to be a very strong evaluation to determine, based off the numbers that are coming in, if that state agency should be able to flex into option 1. So I guess for the legislatures on the line, is that something that you would want to hear? I guess there's 2 ways that can be done. Either the legislation is structured in a way that gives the agency the authority to flex into option 1 for a good cause, or choose your policy statement, or they need to report to you and definitively get that authority. What do you have a preference in that kind of an area? I know as a state agency person, I would feel more comfortable if you gave me that authority. If you told me you needed, I'm going to definitively give me that policy statement. But thoughts, if you've thought about this yet at all. It's also okay if you need to take it back.
I'll just jump in. I haven't thought about it extensively. I sort of came up with that after listening to everybody just now, but
Okay.
and I do understand that agencies want to be told. They don't want to have the they don't want to have the flexibility on their own because for lots of reasons that we all know. So
yeah.
I am happy to, say within a, 2-year period, we come back and we take another look at this. And I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know if we want to go down the route of saying, well, I won't say that. I think we take another look to see whether folks are meeting the 97%, uptime standard, and I'm fine with what folks earlier said about aggregating data. I don't think anybody needs to have, individualized. It can be anonymous. But I think that is important for us to know to decide whether, hey, do we need to hold people's feet to the fire a little bit more here?
Right.
I would, may I jump in?
Yeah. Who's the sorry, Scott? Yes, Scott.
I like it phrase for doggo.
Oh, sorry, Delegate. Sorry, Scott's came up. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I do think we need to think about this, and I agree with what Senator Edelman said, and I think there is some significant conversation that needs to go around about a lot of these things. But one of the things that Senator Edelman said that in the very beginning, in regards to gas stations, I do think that this needs to have some more conversation because they are not apples to apples. That doesn't mean there's not a lot of room for debate and trying to think this through based on my earlier statement. But I will say that gas stations are different. I mean, you can gas up a car in 4 or 5 minutes and be in and out, and there's usually a lot of gas pumps around. So charging can take anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes depending on how much electricity you want to put. So I don't want to disadvantage EVs or EV charging either. I agree with that statement, but I do want to make sure that that we are taking in all the data, and I'm not sure that we have all the data right now, but taking in all the data when we think about having an apples to apples comparison. People have been pumping gas for over 100 years. They know how to pump gas. There are gas stations on like every other corner and in a lot of neighborhoods. So it is far more uncomfortable or far more a severe problem for EV charging when there is one charger or two chargers in suburban area or something along those lines. And that it's not unusual for there to be gas stations on every corner and certain in certain areas. So I do think that's an important piece to make sure that we wrap our heads around as best we can. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Matt with Blink.
Thanks. And I'll try not to belabor this, but I think to the delegate's point, I mean, I'm on a road trip for work and I stopped near the Key Mall southeast of Frederick yesterday, and I drive a 24 Kona electric, and I couldn't get some of the stations to work. And then I noticed that these were older stations, and I was able to find a location that had state-of-the-art 350 kW chargers. And when I've used them both yesterday night and this morning, they work flawlessly without any delay or any connectivity problem. And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that there are companies out there that are right now in the middle of massive redeployments of brand new equipment that's going into the ground. And I think admittedly, we want to understand, are these working? Are they going to be effective? But the technology is changing quickly. And I think, again, like the delegate said, it's not like gas stations. This is new technology. They're complicated, complex pieces of equipment that involve lots of software. So we recognize they need to be, regulated to an extent, but we got to do it the right way. Thank you.
Matt, but one question for you, I guess, is do we know the useful life of the, I get your point, older equipment not going to work as well. I've heard that discussed before, but also what's the, I guess like a gas pump, it's just a little switch where I pull the trigger and the hole opens up and liquid comes out. I'm sure it's a little more complicated than that, but I don't feel like it's that much more complicated. For electric, I know useful life of that kind of equipment is not the same as a mechanical piece. So what's to make sure that we don't end up with a bunch of effectively abandoned, I guess, old pieces of equipment, trying to make sure that people are doing what they need to do to keep those things either updated or pulled out of the ground and put something new in.
Yeah, well, there are a whole bunch of things. So, one, through the federal government, there's a repair and replace program that's going on, identifying sites that are prime locations to take out chargers that are not working or inoperable and put in brand new equipment. There are service level agreements that can be put in place. There are voluntary extended warranty programs that companies like Blink and others offer. So there are a lot of avenues out there. I think the other concern around this is how do you account for the different business models, whether it's host-owned or owner-operator. And, I can understand that the owner-operators have a direct financial incentive, but if you're talking to a hotel that's installed, 2 to 4 chargers and they're suddenly facing, a whole series of new regulations they didn't plan for, how can we accommodate the wide range of business models that we see for EV charging that don't exist in the gas station world? Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Okay,
Yeah, I
go
think
ahead, Scott.
in that example, hotels would be under shared private. So publicly facing, but shared private. So it's designed for guests at the hotel. But no, back to what Senator Hedelman was saying. So if we adopt 2, and let's say that we have a 1-year grace period, and then, but in the language of 2, when we write the regulation, we put in that there's a pathway to get to financial penalties. But let's say that we have a 1-year grace period. That 1 year, it's really important that we get the uptime standards and the uptime numbers reported and into service, and that benefits everyone, because it benefits the charger providers, because it gives them maximum time to take action before we get to penalties. Ideally, we would never get to option 1, but you need to have the
Well, yeah,
reporting in place
Scott, what
quickly.
you're describing sounds sort of like what I know MDE does with some of its regs, which is it takes, the first year to figure out its rules, get them promulgated, get everything set up. A year where they call it their grace period year, where people basically, you're figuring out the reporting, you're working out the kinks, and then that second year or third year, depending on how you're looking at it, that's when enforcement kicks in. So that's what I've noticed when I've been dealing with the Department of Environment. They kind of their MO for putting new rules on the market in place.
Yeah, I would just hope that it wouldn't take a year to put the reporting in place, so then we start getting accurate pictures of uptime. I would hope that the accurate uptime numbers would come kind of quicker.
Well, I guess that kind of leads into like the one other thing, if we're going with option 2, that I think we do need to discuss, is kind of when you were talking about that shared private, because I do think different groups we can get the reporting out of quicker than others. So let's take the publicly funded ones. So, well, a lot of them, whether it be through NEVI or the utility, the framework for reporting is basically there or about to be there. So like the commission's told the utilities, here's how you're going to do it, and the work group's now just finalizing the templates. So like a lot of what, like those guys are probably going to be able to go day 1, or already will be going before that even starts. Versus let's take, depending on who else gets dragged in under that, those who did not previously have that, and setting up a framework to get that in and saying, here's what you need to say in X, Y, and Z. I mean, usually an agency's rulemaking is somewhere between 6 to 9 months once from proposal to final approval. So I think that's the thing where, yes, I think probably part of the group will already be there, and I'd say the new reporters are going to be the ones that will that will take a little bit more time to pull in.
Yeah.
But those who are already receiving money should be able to figure it out pretty quick.
Yeah, okay, I get it. I agree. Yeah, you're going to have to give reporting a little time to ramp up for people who've never done it before.
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess, Scott, on that other thing where you were saying shared private, you were kind of, I won't say you were shoulder shrugging. You were saying, look, I think that are you saying for those individuals that shared private is out of reporting, or are you saying they're subject to reporting but never going to face negatives? What were you, I guess, when you were kind of saying they're probably in a better spot than the completely public ones?
Yeah, they, like a hotel, they're going to get feedback for non-working chargers probably pretty quickly, so from guests, and so I'm not sure if they would even need to. I mean, they're going to provide kind of the reporting that we're going to require for workplaces and MUDs, and yes, that's going to be maybe less than for the publicly funded ones, but.
Okay. And then Senator Hedelman, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess want to have the conversation about kind of who's responsible for what here. So, and that hotel example was a good one. So in terms of like an owner or an operator, right? So it just brings me back a few years ago when, and this has happened to me more than once, when I've gone to like a gas station to put air in my tires and I've lost money in the air machine. And I go into the gas station and they say, oh, sorry, we don't, that's not our problem. Call the number on the thing. There's nothing, like, it's so frustrating. And so I see the same thing here, where it seems to me that the entity that is operating and does the maintenance should, and whose sticker is on there, should be the one that is responsible for the reliability and the uptime. I don't know. I'd be
Actually,
interested to
that's
hear other
go
people
ahead.
what
I
people's
agree,
thoughts.
Senator.
Yeah, so actually that brings up a good point. So I mean, I'm going to stop sharing for a second while I pull it up. MDOT has this great little tracker of MDOT chargers or charging stations. State. Let me see if I can get to it quickly. Or I guess, Amanda, if you know off the top of your head, could you drop that your
Yes.
tracker into the chat?
Yes, 1 second.
Thanks. So while she does that, I think that does a good job of kind of highlighting kind of the breakdown of stations. And let me just station charging network. Okay, excellent. All right, let me share my screen again. All right, so effectively this is, I'm sure there's other sources out there that kind of help track EV stations available in the state, but this is, I think, a good graphic to kind of help us wrap our heads around the question. And so this, to your question, Senator, I think this kind of helps us outline who we may want to target. So I would say from a, is that typically the owner is the person I assume that we, the state, would go to and say, you're the one who has to pay the taxes, you're the guy I'm going to put enforcement on. But from a reporting purpose, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 companies that are operating DC fast chargers, and I think there's more that are doing level 2. And then there's 77 ports in the DC fast charging ports in the state that aren't part of an overall network. It would certainly be easier, and I guess we can open us up to the companies here, because a lot of these network companies are on this call, to collect the data from them. I think that the question is that the appropriate person to put the sum on for enforcement, or is it better to say, owner, you're technically in charge of meeting, and this is something that maybe needs to be left up for the implementing agency to figure out, but owner, financially, you're responsible for this. Something goes wrong, I'm going to be coming to you to knock on your door. But the people that have the know-how to actually report this information are probably the individual companies I have listed here on this website. I'll stop there for a minute. Is that maybe getting to where you were going with this, or are you thinking more fundamentally that you would want to put the financial thumb on the actual operator of the station, not the owner?
Are you asking me?
Well, I guess I'm starting with you, yeah. But
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the latter, but I want to hear what people have to say.
okay. All right, so I guess Matt, I'll start with you as the as one of the businesses.
Sure, and I think this is where input from other EVSE companies on the call would be very valuable. But quickly, in Blink's case, again, I think it just say it depends, but it does on the business model. If it's the owner operator, the network, then it's very clear. If it's one of the kind of in between where it's subscription or hybrid, then it probably comes down to, again, who's the network. But if it's the host owned, then there are issues around maybe legal agreements and so on that come into play, and not everyone decides to network their chargers as well. So again, I welcome input from my industry colleagues on that too.
All right. Yeah, I think this would be a good time to hear from the industry, then I'll go to the members. So go ahead and raise your hand if we'll probably take 2 or 3 of your comments. Emily, Caitlin. Do I have Electrify America on here? Any of you have thoughts as one of the network operators? All right.
Can you just
You're
clarify
speaking.
what the question is again? Sorry.
If the appropriate people to require reporting and maintenance are to ensure that the thoughts on this idea that enforcement and reporting would actually fall on the network operator, not on the direct owner. So those who actually get contacted to basically the operator of the station. And thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say from ChargePoint's perspective. So we typically don't own and operate the stations, but we do offer and can offer maintenance. If the station owner purchases that. So we have a standard warranty, but then there's additional kind of maintenance and repair services that they can purchase from us. But at the end of the day, they own the station. And certainly if we were required to do reporting on their behalf, if there were uptime requirements, we could do that. But they may have to make the choice to allow us to do that, I guess. And I think that's what Matt was getting at, where there may be some legal and contractual things that just may need to be sorted out, specifically in Maryland, if we were to, if customers were to purchase our equipment, I guess.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
I think it does. So just to echo it back, theoretically, a regulatory scheme could be set up along those routes, but that'd be on a going forward basis. Effectively, contracts would have to be reevaluated to determine if you could legally engage in that activity, at least with existing ones, and then new ones going forward, right, that would just be part of your contract.
Have to be made clear. Yeah. So that's why I just think it's really important if that is what the regulation is going to be. Again, clarifying exactly what kind of reporting will be necessary, when it will have to be provided. Just so that's very clear for us and then the potential customer purchasing the equipment. So they're very clear on what the responsibilities are. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
All right, Michael, and then I'm going to go to members.
Thanks, Ben. Michael Krauthammer, representing the Alliance for Transportation Electrification. So, I've spoken up on these calls before. As you all know, I'm a Marylander. I've installed a lot of infrastructure here in Maryland over many years, DC fast and level 2. For purposes of this conversation, I think it would be helpful to think about DC fast and level 2 separately. DC fast is primarily owned by the large network operators, EVgo, Electrify America, Tesla. Level 2 chargers, for the most part, are owned by people like hotels, shopping centers, grocery stores, retailers, apartment buildings, office buildings, whatnot. The name on those chargers is not the company that owns or operates the charger. The chargers are owned by the small businesses primarily who own the shopping center or the store or the office building. The names on the chargers represent like the cloud network, the network operator that accepts payments and enables pricing to be displayed on the screens and enables dashboards to be shown to the landlord. They provide a very valuable service, but the way we think about operating chargers is not what they do. Some of them may sell service plans to the site host that bought the charger from them, but those are optional. Other than in those circumstances where the site host has purchased a separate service from the charging network, if they even offer it, they're under no obligation to keep those chargers up and running. None. It's completely up to the retailer or the office building or hotel or whomever. So there's a huge split, between the name on the charger and who actually has responsibility. I understand that everybody on this call wants customers to have a good experience, but from the charging industry's perspective and from the commercial real estate market's perspective, everything we're talking about here is very onerous, and this is not at all consistent with the state's goals of more charging infrastructure. Holding people's feet to the fire isn't the solution. These companies are installing chargers voluntarily, and if a charger isn't working, a penalty is not going to get it fixed. All they're going to do is take the charger away, and they're probably never going to put another one out. These requirements Allison was talking about the requirements around placing a device back in service, which are different from most of what we're talking about. That too is a highly contentious topic in other places where it's being discussed, which is not many. But I don't want to get off on that digression. Just for some perspective, option 3, which is the weakest on the table and which has received hardly any support today, is considerably more complicated, burdensome, and oppressive than what I can recall seeing in any other state. With regard to mandatory reporting on this level of detail, unless a significant amount of the cost is paid for with public or utility funds, which is not what we're talking about here, I'm pretty confident saying I've never heard about this level of reporting, even reporting being required, let alone these other measures. So I'll just close by saying, if the goal is to have a good, reliable network, I fear that we're going off in the wrong direction. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Michael. All right, going back to the members. We'll start with the delegate and then the senator. Go ahead, delegates.
I think Michael brings up some good points, and we need to talk through them. I will say, in my mind, all of the constituent complaints that I have received regarding charging has been level 3 charging. It hasn't been level 2. I think that you may agree or disagree with a lot of what Michael said, but I think that part is pretty clear. All of the complaints I've got have been on the big level 3 charging facilities. It hasn't been on in the shopping mall outside of Giant, because they're free, and I think people, it's free, so I don't think they complain about it so much. But if you're paying for it at those level 3 chargers, that's where all of my complaints have been.
Okay, I want to hear from the senator, then I have an idea. Go ahead, Senator Edelman.
Well, I guess my question was to Michael. It's like I appreciated the discussion about the relationship between the network operators and the landlords, but it begs the question: then where does the buck stop? And that is, as a policymaker, we want to have accountability and transparency for the public who is paying for a service, and for the ratepayers, and tax dollars that are going to support a service, and that this is clearly a direction that we want and need to move in. At the end, I understand we're building it, and that takes time, and I appreciate that, and that there are so many different stakeholders involved at different points of the process, but there does need to be, and I think it's entirely appropriate for accountability along that way. And so the scenario that I'm interpreting, kind of how you described it as, well, there are lots of people, involved, and, different people have different pieces of it, and they shouldn't be held accountable. So I guess I sort of throw it back and say, so what happens when something isn't working? Are you suggesting holding the landlord responsible? Are you suggesting, what are you suggesting?
Well, first, so I appreciate the question. With regard to ratepayer or taxpayer dollars being invested in infrastructure, that's a different story. That's at that point, the developer has taken those funds, and then for strings to be attached, is a policy call. It's more about the chargers that are installed without taxpayer or ratepayer funding. You ask a good question, and there's been some talk in the earlier comment or conversation about like the hotels. if the chargers at the hotel aren't working, then people are going to post it on Google or Yelp or hotels.com or the charger websites and people will go into the office. They'll go to the front desk and they'll complain about the chargers not working. They'll tell the general manager. I mean, it'll be just like any other service at any other retail establishment that customers may be dissatisfied with. We don't get into the business of regulating other infrastructure, and so I guess the question is, why should chargers be different?
Okay. I mean, I
Go ahead,
appreciate
Senator.
that answer. No, go ahead. I don't think we need to belabor the point, but okay, thanks.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of where I was going there. All right, so to
Ben,
kind of go ahead,
Ben,
Scott.
Yeah, back to the example of the hotels. So, and then your question was, do we put requirements on the network operators or the owner, or and there's a lot of business models and stuff. The reporting could be something as simple as a plan. So the charger's not working, then the hotel or the entity would have to file a plan saying, what are we going to do? Somebody comes in, do we have an electrician on call? Have we bought a service plan? Then okay, well then that's all laid out. Just a plan as to what happens if it's not working. That would kind of cover all the cases of business models and network provider versus owner and things like that. You just have to make an affirmative statement. If it's not working, what am I going to do?
So effectively making sure that basically a condition of putting something in this state is that you've told us that you have a game plan to maintain this. You're not just putting it in the ground you're not putting it in the ground without any longevity thought behind it.
Yeah. That could be, that seems to me to be very simple, a very easy achievable portion of the reporting requirement.
Okay, so I'm going to put a proposal forward so we can put a pin in it and move on. And then obviously members, we probably over the next week and a half can email back and forth trying to refine this. Publicly funded, again, there's going to be plenty of details that the implementing agency needs to work out. But in general, publicly funded charging is subject to reporting and then negative financial consequences to be determined, but they would have there could be some sort of negative stick there. For the non-publicly funded chargers, from a tiered perspective, for DC fast charging, we would expect reporting and then with the option to flex up, whether that be through a report to the legislature or the legislature bestows that authority upon the implementing agency. And then for everything else, which is basically level 2 charging, as Scott said, a condition of installing in the state when you install is giving us a longevity maintenance plan. That would be something that you would maintain, and implementing agency would have to figure out those details. But basically, there's not a reporting requirement attached to level 2, but there is something that basically shows that you have a game plan to maintain your station. And once again, the implementing agency has the task of keeping the legislature informed through annual reports about the state of charging and if something needs to change on that front. Stop there. Go ahead and pick that to pieces or clarify what I'm thinking. Go ahead, Senator.
Well, I like the idea. I like the idea of having a maintenance plan as a condition of installing. I guess the question is, how does the agency know whether
Ben, if you can hear me, that agrees with what I was saying. Yes.
No,
I can hear you, Scott. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I like that idea, but the question is then what happens? How do we know that an L2, that the L2s are not adhering to their maintenance plan if we're not getting reporting data from them?
I guess this would be throwing it out there, but it can also be something for the group to take back. And or, you know, we can change this idea now. But I guess a couple ideas could be: one, we know weights and measures. These level 2s are still subject to weights and measures who, while it's not all, well, not all things that are measured through uptime reliability fall under weights and measures, a significant number of them are. So if the customer can't initiate a charge, or they're, or if it's not appropriately assessing the customer bill, that station is shut down until such time as it is fixed. The next one could be if a complaint is, we've been talking about this idea that there would be proactive and reactive inspections of stations. We could theoretically be sending around the implementing agency. If we do proactive, they're going to need a bigger budget, obviously, but we could require the implementing agency to have a schedule to go around and check everything, which would include the level 2s, and if they're finding issues, which once again, it feels a little duplicative of weights and measures, but they could go around and check those stations, and if they're saying that things aren't being followed up on, that could be subject to negative consequences or a requirement that be followed up on. These are just ideas. These aren't me having sat down and thought about them a long time. But those would be, I guess, 2 ways to do it. The other is that we could consider, if you're a large operator of level 2, we require some sort of reporting to the state. So if you're, I don't know, if you have if you own and operate 100+ ports or something, I don't know, we choose your number. We do put you under the framework, but we don't put small operators under the framework. So we're catching those who have made a significant financial investment in the state, not those who have tepidly dipped their toe.
Yep, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
And I
as well.
agree. I agree. We will get some information from weights and measures too.
May I jump in really quickly?
Yes, delegate.
Thank you. I do like what you said about potentially flexing up, because we are in very much uncharted territory. So the more flexibility we have, I think, the better. So I like that concept.
Other members? Okay, I'm going to put a pin in this one for now. I'm going to document up what I just said, and that will be put in front of you all. Say thumbs up, thumbs down to at the next meeting. Obviously, and I'll probably ask if over the next week or so, if you think that there's things that you would like to see changed before the meeting, let's just have a good, robust email chain going around, try and settle things. All right. All right, I'm going to jump up to the reporting section real quick, and then we'll go down to the implementing agency. So this starts on page 5 and goes down to page 7. All right, so on reporting, where we have been is that the implementing agency would develop their rules for data reporting based on the standards that they need to enforce. That would be frequency, data standardization, cybersecurity exceptions, et cetera. Basically, whatever they need to do to comply, to collect the appropriate data to align with the 97% uptime measurements and other necessary information for the state. And then obviously and I think following up on what Matt was saying, I think I'm going to assume with this group is that we're going to generally follow NEVI standards unless there's good cause to have a deviation. And so as minimum standards, MDOT recommended the following list that is in blue here. And that would be uptime at the port level. I've added a caveat as determined in the enforcement section below. So basically whatever reporting is necessary for the enforcement that we just discussed. And then at time of registration, you're giving us what your kilowatt hour levels are, your number of ports and connectors, your hours of availability, who your network operator is, when you will be open, what type of facility we're talking about. This is the owner operator versus, I don't know, we can talk about a site host, and you can go ahead and explain that a little more, Amanda, if needed. Basically minimum fees, payment methods, and for annual, and then for obviously tax purposes, we need to know what your kilowatt hour output is, or charge, basically how much kind of kilowatt hours you output in a year. So I would say anything that's registered with the state is kind of what we're saying you need to report. And then for the port, then for enforcement, to do the 97% uptime, if you are required to report that, then you would follow whatever the agency sets up in its regulatory scheme to do that uptime measurement. So I guess the proposal on the table is in blue. I know there's been some discussion about doing all NEVI standards. I have included those in the table below if you would all like to walk through those individually. But here in blue is what I have as the minimum proposal for you all.
Ben,
Go ahead, members.
Ben, I can clarify
ahead,
the
Amanda.
facility type. I think I pulled these categories from what's reported in the alternative fuels data set. The facility type is like if it's at a gas station versus a giant parking lot. I think more so if the implementing agency decides to put something public facing, this could be useful for consumers to have.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Paul. I would disagree with including, is there a fee to charge? Because I think we've all agreed that the only charging fee is going to be based on kilowatt hours, not on time or something else.
Well, oh, hold on. Allison, just for the, remind everyone, the kilowatt hour is the accepted form. Don't you also have other, but weren't there a couple other things that you were allowing to be assessed?
So kilowatt hours is essentially the method of sale for the electrical charge in a consumer transaction. Additionally, there's amperage that's marked on the dispenser as well as per the marking requirements through NCWM, the NTEP program. So all those are required.
Sorry. Do you require, sorry, I should say, when somebody wants to charge at the station, there's going to be $1 per kilowatt hour they pay. Are they allowed to assess the customer anything else when doing that?
In addition to, they can assess different fees on top of that. So they'll charge by kilowatt hour, and that will be displayed on the face of the dispenser at the beginning of the transaction. That way the consumer can agree to whatever they're going to charge. But additionally, if there's any other requirements, such as $2 to park in this space or $6 per minute upon completion of charging, or whatever various fees, they are allowed to assess that as long as the customer is able to definitively see that and agree to it.
Okay.
Okay,
So Paul,
I stand corrected. Thank you.
Welcome. All right, members, 30 seconds to raise hands and raise concerns with what's in blue. All right. Going down to what will be the state agency's favorite discussion, which is which of us gets the bag. All right. So I do have cost estimates. Go ahead, Senator. Got it. Yep. What am I thinking? All right. So So both the PSC and the Comptroller's Office, I have cost estimates for, and I will bring those up right now. I'm going to run through the other state agencies to see if you have cost estimates for us, starting with MDOT.
Sorry, we're still working on it, but I aim to have it to you before the next meeting.
All right, MDOT's working. Cost MEA.
We also do not have it at this time. We'll get it beforehand.
All right, weights and measures.
So we do have a generalized idea of a cost estimate. That would be to purchase standards vehicles for the inspection activities for Inspector Strive, as well as adding 2 pins. Now, this would be if we continue to operate the weights and measures program as we have operated, just adding on the inspection activities of these devices. So looking at the purchase of 4 standards, 2 vans, and adding 2 additional pins for our agency, a rough estimate just to get it started, just to start the program that particular year, would be about a little over $500,000 currently to get the program
And
up.
that's just to do what you're already required to do under law, right?
Exactly how we operate our programs. That would be no specified time parameters. That would be just adding 2 positions for the job duties, 2 vehicles, and 4 standards. That would be 2 standards per inspector to take out. That's as long as we don't change any parameters of the program.
And so that's just accuracy, but you have not done a cost estimate on it. If it's decided that you will have to do reliability and uptime, correct?
That would be very difficult to estimate since that's not something we typically oversee.
All right. I'm going to hop then into what the PSC has done on that estimate, and then also what and then I'll let the comptroller speak in. So, and I also believe I have Mikkel here who can also clarify anything I say wrong. So for the PSC, if we were asked to do uptime and reliability, we've estimated approximately $1.5 to $2 million, with about $500,000 to with about $500,000 to $700,000 a year in ongoing expense. So basically, that would be between $1.5 to $1.5 million of upstart costs that would have to be reoccurred on an infrequent basis. And then the ongoing $500,000 to $700,000 depending on the number of bodies hired. And that's before we talk. We're still waiting on estimates of benefits from HR. What went into this? So PSC estimated that if we were required to, and Mikkel, you're assuming that we have to check every EV charger in the state every year?
Yes.
Okay, so once again, these numbers can come down depending on what proactive enforcement looks like, but once this was assuming worst case. Basically it was, if we had to check 27,000 EV chargers in the state once a year, that was 8 to 10 technicians. So it's not engineers, but these would be people that have electrical are trained electricians, and they get EBITP certs. And so what this is assuming is that 20 minutes per EV charger. So we're thinking basically 118 chargers a day, but in discussions with weights and measures, that does seem a little aggressive, because we know there's been issues with being able to even check stuff out in California for weights and measures. So, but that's how we're currently estimating those ongoing costs. So it's about $75,000 a year without benefits, and then about for each car you buy, you're looking at about, I want to say, $24,000 to $36,000. And then we did take weights and measures standard. I think, Mikkel, you're assuming 1 standard or 1 piece of testing equipment per person. You're not assuming that we're testing multiple things.
Yeah, correct. 1 per person.
Right. Okay, so that would be 1 piece of that equipment was $100,000. So obviously these are rough numbers, but that is how we came up with our estimates for if we were required to do this is basically if we had to create what would be a field division. The PSC does have analyst positions. I might go back to my team and recommend that we throw 1 or 2 extra bodies in there for analysts, but it wouldn't be a hot, I would say, a big increase for the analyst positions for us since we technically have those today. So this is effectively a large part of if we are required to do ongoing proactive monitoring of stations, but less if we just have to do, I guess, send somebody out every once in a while, and then we might have to beef up 1 or 2 areas within our agency in terms of just making sure we have the right analysts in place. All right, Comptroller, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, I have been told that our office, if we were asked to do full implementation, you can see sort of the numbers here on this, but if we were asked to do full implementation of the program, we wouldn't be able to do that until 2028 due to all of our current IT transition work. We're undergoing some major transitions in the office. And then, as you can see here, we presented a budget with the full-time equivalents and the numbers associated with that.
Right. And then Alex, looking at what you have here, are there any field individuals within your estimate, or is this just assuming that the stations are sending you the information you need? You're not sending anyone out there to check if the station's working properly?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, so this is just the analyst support.
Yes.
Okay. So those are cost estimates. Agencies, let's keep working on finalizing these, but let's get into the policy discussion of if you're required to do it. So we've all agreed generally that weights and measures is going to retain meter accuracy in Handbook 44 implementation. Before I hop into the other uptime and reliability, is there anyone who has a problem with that idea? All right, great. That's one issue down. All right, now for uptime and reliability. I guess I can go first on trying to think through who should be in charge of this. I think there's 2 ways we can approach it. You can do weights and measures of the whole kit and caboodle, but they haven't really been previously set up before to do what would effectively be a lot of analytical work with some field checking. PFC, MDOT, or I would say that Comptroller has their fuel alternative fuels division, or not alternative fuels division, the fuel quality division, who might be well suited for this. We, the PSC, oversee the utilities, which are, I think we've estimated about half the equipment that's currently in the state. And we already had to stand up the process for utility data. So we're already there on a number of issues. And then MDOT has to do it for NEVI. I think we were thinking Comptroller, MDOT, or PSC as the reliability uptime area, since we use kind of this idea of making sure this station's fuel is doing what you need it to do, kind of previously fallen under one of those categories. Happy to talk that out. Turn it over to other members who you think should implement the uptime reliability and why.
Well, this is Paul Verchinsky. I guess I've got a little bit of heartburn about divvying this up between 2 state agencies. It would be a lot better for consumers if they're only dealing with 1 state agency. The other potential issue here is there may be some savings with having it within 1 agency rather than in 2. And I'm saying this because you're going to have weights and measures out there, either because a EVSE has gone down, but at the same time they could be checking other EVSEs. You don't have that synergism if you divvy that up between 2 state agencies, at least in my opinion. And I think it gets conflated in the view of the consumer as to who they should really be talking to, unless there's some real sharp demarcation that people can understand easily.
Thank you, Paul. Other members would like to hear from everyone.
This is Amanda from MDOT. I would agree with what Paul just said in that a lot of careful thinking about consideration if it is split up between MDA for meter accuracy and another agency for reliability / uptime. I think currently we are thinking, if not MDA, PSC, I think would be our first choice. MDOT, I think, would be our second choice, PSC, because they already have experience with working with the utilities on data reporting and reliability. MDOT, I mean, I think all agencies would need some type of authority, new authority. Currently, our state highway administration does roads and highway work, so it would be a new challenge for them. Yeah, that's what I have for now.
Thank you, Amanda. We'll go through the state agencies and I'll turn it over. Go ahead, Drew.
Thanks. Yeah. No, well, I just want to say, I mean, we wouldn't really be working with the utilities on this since this will be, you know, with the charging stations. So, you know, we'd have to have relationships with, you know, Tesla, EVgo, Blink, all those folks, et cetera, that we don't really currently have. And this would require probably a whole new division for us, if not kind of a subset within maybe our engineering division. And yeah, and we wouldn't necessarily be able to do this immediately either. We need time to get those employees, obviously. So, you know, we kind of have some recent experience with this. Just for example, we've gotten extra pins for offshore wind, but we've actually not received the pins yet and haven't been able to advertise them yet. And that's been, you know, multiple years in the making. So, you know, I'll just say from a technical staff perspective, the PSC, I would have concerns that we would even get the pins, be able to post them, you know, and get the people we need to do what we need to do in a sufficient time frame.
No, that's fair, Drew. We have run into that problem. I think all agencies will run into that problem now. Rachel, MDA.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'll just reiterate what you said. That's an issue that MDA would have as well. I think our concern is we know very well how to do what Weights and Measures already does with co-regulation with the comptroller's office. So there's already precedent for two agencies regulating sort of the same thing like we do with the gas pumps. We just don't have any expertise here at all in uptime and reliability. We don't. And so if we're already looking at a fiscal note for us of $610,000 just to purchase the standards and 2 new field staff and 2 equipment, like we know what our numbers are. We know what's in our wheelhouse and how to do that well. But it would again increase our fiscal note significantly because we'd have to bring in expertise just for reliability and uptime, whereas we feel some of the other agencies may already have those capabilities. It would take you more time to stand up a team. We would also need additional time to stand up a team, hire people who know anything about reliability and uptime because we just don't have that type of expertise here at MDA.
Thank you, Rachel. MEA.
Yeah, just purely based off of experience, expertise, kind of sets of best practices. You know, NEVI. I mean, we're thinking of MDOT, then MDA, and then PSC. I do understand the comment of if you were splitting it up beyond 2, but I would be of support of possibly of, you know, 1 or 2 working in tandem. But I understand that comment. But those would be kind of our top 3.
Thank you. And I will say there's going to have to be collaboration no matter what we do here, because this idea that about the privately or the publicly, basically those receiving grants, incentives, et cetera, being under the framework means that whoever the implementing agency is has to be in close coordination with those handing out dollars to be able to know who they're tracking and enforcing on. All right, I think that was the state agent comptroller's office. I didn't ask you, Alex.
I think that, you know, in line with some comments that have, you know, some of the more recent comments, I think we would have a preference on perhaps MDOT, MDA, PSC, or a combination of those.
Thanks. Heard from Paul, so I'll go Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I agree with Paul. I just want whatever's simplest for reporting. I mean, as far as budgets and staff and manpower, I don't really have an opinion on that, but so I'll just agree with what Paul said before.
Okay, so more in the camp of a single implementer for customer's sake, which would then put you more on the weights and measures side.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, thank you. All right, Matt, and then I will go to the delegate and the senator, the delegates and senator.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I would echo what Paul and Scott said. You know, reluctant to have that authority divided up among too many different entities, but understand that MDA has not been, you know, previously focused on reliability. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. All right, go ahead with Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, then Delegate Allen, then Senator Hedelman. Did Delegate Fraser fall off? All right, Delegate Allen, are you still on? All right, Senator, you're still on, so go ahead.
I'm still here. I think I echo what the last person said. I mean, MDA has, you know, weights and measures is purchasing the equipment. They're out there doing something similar but different. And I agree, I would hate to divide it among too many different agencies. I understand it's not exactly lining up with what they have done, but it seems the most practical and efficient way forward.
All right, I'm hearing majority would prefer MDA weights and measures for the simplicity aspect of it. And then the follow-up two agencies, if it's not them, are PSC and MDOT. I think that's, so I will record that. Is there any other thoughts from the members? And let me check the chat really quick. I saw something come over. Sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks again, and this is just from Emily Kelly's comment from ChargePoint. But in other states, the agency who manages the public funding program has authority on collecting and analyzing uptime reports. So I think it's just worth bearing that in mind as a point of comparison.
Right. Well, in that case, that puts it on PSC or MDOT. So I think that's the take back for the group is that's the two. So from an implementation standpoint, if those who are not managing the funds are not, I think they would still have some aspect in terms of enforcement, but and that would have to be worked out. But ultimately, the final collector of the data and reporter and possible negative consequences would be whoever the implementing agency is, which the group is leaning towards MDA weights and measures. All right, so I will send that out for the group. We need to talk through negatives and pros there so that we just make sure, I think we'll need to talk. So Rachel, Allison will need to talk through what you think you would need if that fell on you for report purposes. I'll also flush out the issue of PSC MDOT as well. State agencies, we still need budgets though, because obviously this is important for whoever the implementers or whoever the drafters of legislation may be. We'll put that around. All right. Done data reporting and tracking. All right, last thing on the framework is registration and compliance. So there's two parts to this. One is how long do we have to give stations to tell the agency that they are, and this would be are part of it. And then the other charge to us was, what is the grace period we have in place to set up standards and allow existing stations to come into compliance with said standards. So for registration, I think Paul has said between 30 to 60 days, or maybe it's 60 to 90 days to register with the state, and that but with ability to waive penalties for good cause. MDOT has recommended 1 year, and then or we can just leave to the implementing agency. Let's just do a raise of hands for this. So those of you, go ahead, Amanda, MDOT.
I was just going to add or clarify. So 1 year, we think for existing stations for registration, and for new stations, we want to update that to 3 months, and want to clarify that this timeline begins after the implementing agency stands up sort of like the database for inputting this information, and while that administratively stands up, potentially an education campaign outreach could also be done simultaneously to get owners and or operators aware of these standards.
All right, I've captured that modification. So with that modification, go ahead and raise your hands if you support MDOT's proposal for registration. I have one from Senator Hellman. I'm going to put mine up as well, but I don't know that I can raise my own hand here. I have 2. Diego has a thumbs up. 3 from Rachel. 4 from Comptroller. 6. All right, that's 6 votes. Those who support Paul's proposal. Oh, go ahead, Matt. Which one are you voting for?
Oh, sorry. You go ahead with Paul's proposal. It's all right.
Sorry.
It's okay. Please proceed. That was inadvertent.
Okay, for Paul's proposal, I have 1. All right, the proposal we're going to send back to the group for final approval will be MDOT's. Matt, were you asking a clarifying question?
I was just trying to look at something that you're putting on here, but I understand now, so it's all good. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, now for the compliance, this is the issue of basically setting up, how would I put it? Basically, once the new rules are in effect, compliance for the existing stations to start complying with those rules. The proposals that I currently have are 3 years from MDOT. If anyone else on this call currently has a proposal, or else we leave it to the implementing agency. Go ahead, Amanda.
We would also like to update or amend this one. So we arrived at 1 year to 18 months. I think this could be either for work group feedback, or if we decide that the implementing agency can decide to begin reporting reliability data after registration. And in terms of complying with 97% uptime, I guess we were thinking about it as the 97% should be a goal as soon as reliability data, or sorry, as soon as reporting starts, but not necessarily before, or there can still be a grace period, perhaps a year before any penalties start, if that makes sense.
Could I maybe put forward the MDE approach as a friendly amendment? I guess it would be. You tell me if this makes sense. The implementing agency has effectively about a year to get the framework in place. They have a year to do the initial round of reporting, which is complete grace period, and then the third year is where enforcement would start. And that effectively doesn't matter if we're talking about new or old stations, because of the amount of time that we're talking about.
Can you say that one more time?
The implementing agency has 1 year to get their rules in place, what they're going to do. The second year is reporting starts, and that's a grace period of reporting. There is no negatives anywhere on the board. The third year is where negatives could begin. And the implementing agency during that period on the first and second year reporting are obviously doing the reports they need to the legislature.
I think we could be okay with that.
Okay.
But I'll have to bring it back to my team again.
Okay. And then your proposal is effectively, once the rules are in place, 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
Not 3 years.
We would do 12 to 18 months for reporting data, with the 1 year grace period is what we're thinking before any enforcement is in place. So basically, that way there's a year for the implementing agency to receive the data, and to sort of establish these relationships with whoever the responsible entity is, whether it's the owner or the operator, before going into implementing any penalties for the applicable EVSE.
All right, let's go ahead and just do what we did before. Go ahead, Matt, before I do the vote.
Yes, just sorry, quick question. So with the MDOT and MEA, I guess, proposal that's here about the minimum of 12 to 18 months, is that forward-looking for stations upon installation, or is there a retroactive dimension to previously installed stations?
I think we were thinking of this for existing and new.
With no
Matt, how
right?
Go ahead,
To
Cindy.
clarify, and I don't know if this is what Matt meant, but no expectation to look back, right? This is forward facing.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, thanks for clarifying.
So the 97% uptime is a forward-looking metric at the point in time it starts. Okay. I
We
guess.
also
Go ahead.
we also, I think, should make it clear somehow that during that grace period, it's in the best interests of the charging providers to start reporting as early as possible, because that would give them the greatest lever arm to improve service before you get to penalties. So we need to make it clear to them that once we set the rules in place for reporting, they should start right away and and start taking that uptime data. It's in their interest.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, I'm not really too happy about what I'm hearing on existing stations, and mostly in relationship to the ones we funded through the utilities. They've been doing this for almost 6 years now, and you're going to give them another grace period. Doesn't make any
Paul,
sense to me.
Paul, what I have in blue, would that satisfy the utility uptime standards per House Bill 834 remain in effect until everything is fully in place? Basically, there is no any more grace period for utilities.
Okay.
All right. So the proposal is minimum of 12 to 18 months once the rules are in place for reporting to begin, and there will be a 1-year grace period before there's any enforcement based on the data that's in that reporting. Also, any current uptime standards, really the only ones that are on the book are the utilities, but I can substitute that in as any. Standards.
You've
Including
got some,
utility.
yeah, you've got some state-funded ones through the VW diesel settlement and other ones that were separately funded by the legislature that have been up and running. And I think those, should be included with not an extended grace period. I mean, we expect them to be operating.
When they receive those funds, did they have an uptime standard requirement upon them?
I can't speak for the MEA because I think most of those funds came through. I have no idea what those contracts say.
I think that will be the rub, is you have a bunch of stations. The utilities, clearly, we have a expectation at this time they should be up, and if not, the commission has authority to fine and force it to be fixed. All these other stations, as far as I'm aware, don't have that on them. So they would still need to stand up how that would work. And then basically that's a change in the funding mechanisms that have been received. If that's where the group wants to go, that is fine. I can add that. So I guess starting with that, for anything that has received public funding that is not the utility, which the utilities, I'm going to assume we all agree, stay under the current rules until this is implemented. But for those that don't currently have uptime standards but receive some form of public funding, should they receive the 1-year grace period?
You might ask MEA what's in their standard contract. They may have put in some requirements that we don't know about.
MEA?
Yeah.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm turning over to DA though.
Yes, we do have when we're providing our funding for our grants, it's typically 3 years, or it's up to 3 years, and it's a quarterly report.
And is it
Okay.
97% uptime? Go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to ask that clarifying question because my understanding is the 3 years is for data reporting, but I think to Paul's point is sort of, and Ben's question is there, as far as I'm aware, there is no requirement in state-funded charging station contracts now that would clearly establish the 97% uptime to set that expectation.
I'll read more thoroughly. It's not that there's not a penalty, but it is that we are wanting to track if something is down. So I'll read a little bit more thoroughly just to see XYZ has to be running, and we're trying to get information, but as of right now, I know that there's not a penalty for any uptime.
All right, but for purposes of sending around something for group, does the group want to add that on before I take a vote on the overall package that I have highlighted in blue? I guess raise your hand if you want what Paul just stated to be added, which is those who are receiving state funds should not be allowed to have the 1-year grace period. Okay, don't see any hands going up. All right. So the proposal on the table is a minimum of 12 to 18 months once rules are in place for reporting and a 1-year grace period before that there is reporting. Recommend that any current standards, including utility uptime standards, remain in effect until the implementing agency has implemented its rules. Raise your hands if you're okay with that proposal. Mine's up. 1, 2.
Wait, Ben, can I clarify?
Go ahead.
I think it's 1 year. I think our proposal is 1-year grace period before there is enforcement.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Do you support that now?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's 5. All right, 5. Raise your hand if you oppose. All right, the proposal for the group that I will send around is what is in blue. All right, we are at time. We have gotten through everything that is in this framework document that I will send around. Hold on, let me just pull up. I will recirculate this table document. Members, between now, preferably the end of the week, if you have issues with what is underlined, I would like to hear from you on those and just send it to the whole group. I'll set up an email chain for members to send that back and forth for approval or disapproval at the next meeting. And then there were 1 or 2 issues in here that I think still needed discussion. And so I will try and put a proposal in there for you all either to react to as a positive or a negative. All right. Questions before we hang up for the day? Statements. Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Ben. And just to clarify, we have not landed on a final recommendation between the options 1, 2, and 3. I know we've discussed them at length, but that is something that we're going to have to come back to. Is that right?
I think we have landed on option. There's an option 2 that the group is going to say yes or no to at the next meeting, which is option 2 for publicly funded stations, DC fast charger and DC fast charging. Level 2 has to give a reporting, or has to basically get, when they register, has to state their maintenance plan with the state, and then obviously whoever has proactive checking has the ability, when they check, to see if they are complying with that or not. But it's not something that will be proactively reported. And then that agency also has a requirement to annually report to the state on reliability, and that the legislature will then have the ability, based off that report, to state if they want to give the an agency the authority to go above what they have today. And I will write that all down, but that is where that is the current proposal for approval. And so that will be what we say yes or no to at the next meeting. And if somebody wants to propose modifications ahead of time, I would ask for people to send that in.
Okay, thanks.
Does that work? Thanks. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day. I will talk to you. Our next meeting is Tuesday, the 16th, because that Monday is a holiday. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.